have no idea, so it's recording. So
Okay,
good
let's go.
morning, everyone. Welcome to January's LAWA's membership meeting. Today we have two educational pieces. The first is by Will on fight scenes, and the second is writing good dialogue with Carissa. We have a few announcements to make this morning. The first is about future meetings. Um, we are hoping to start meeting again in person in March, and that'll be in Brainerd at the Faith Baptist Church. The board of directors will be deciding that in February because it's really based on where we're at with COVID. But this church has a very large room, has coffee, and gives us the ability to social distance and stay the 6 feet apart. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm looking forward. Hi, Angeli. I'm looking forward to the time when we can all start getting back together and
For
stuff.
sure.
So stay tuned for news on that. Two is we are starting a new program. The membership committee has put together what is going to be called the LAWA Help Desk. And how that's going to work is there's going to be a form that will be on the LAWA website that you will be able to click on. It's going to be a Google form. You fill it in, you save it, and you send it to the LAWA Help Desk email. At that point, the help desk person will send an email out to the entire membership because we're based on writers helping writers. So it's everybody helping each other. On who could help, it'll be anonymous who it is, but that someone has a request for help, say on character building or on editing or marketing or publishing their books. And then hopefully some members will respond and we will be able to connect the two together so that everyone is helping each other. It's all a part of building our writing community and opening the door for those who need assistance, especially when we're all so isolated. It really helps. We did our first LAWA shares in January. I was the featured. We had two people, which was okay for the first one because I was just trying it out. But we're going to do it again in February. In February, it's still going to be the second Sunday of the month until we can figure out exactly what date we want to have it on. But the author of the month is going to be Barb Schlichting. And she's going to be reading.
That's on Valentine's Day?
Is that the second Sunday?
Yeah.
Well, what better way to love somebody and share the love?
It's all good. I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
Is it that day? Yeah.
But she'll be sharing a work in progress and is going to be requesting some feedback and some critique on her piece. So I'm not sure what the topic or what her piece is, but it should be fun if you can attend, watch Facebook, and I'll put more on there about it. My third announcement is the writers retreat. The committee is and the board are putting together a writing retreat to happen on May 21st through 23rd. The theme of the retreat is if your pen was a magic wand. It's going to be really a transformational writing retreat for our members that will really encompass the our creativity through not only creative arts, but through writing. And we're going to be spending a weekend in a nature filled area location. that should get all our juices flowing. We're looking at having it at Cragen's in Brainerd. And we really want to create a total immersion experience for the weekend with good food, fellowship. I'm hoping s'mores. It bring, it's going to be a bring your own wine event and stuff. But the cost for the writing retreat is going to be $150 per person. I know
But that's for all
everybody-
3 days, right?
That's for
It
all 3
covers everything?
days, room, food, activities, the whole works. These things aren't cheap to pull off, and I've been working hard on writing grants to fund the majority of it. So the best I could do was 150. So if I can score some more money, I don't even know if we're going to get this grant. So if I can score some more money, that it may lower the cost, or it may allow sponsorships for those who absolutely cannot afford to come otherwise. And those dates again are going to be May 21st through 23rd. And watch Facebook and the website, because registration is going to begin on February 15th. And it'll be fun. I mean, we're going to have meditations every morning, a couple inspiring presentations. Kelly Hanel with the Spirit Wellness Center is going to be there to do free 15-minute counseling sessions with anybody who wants to sign up and talk about their writing and some challenges, or even if they want to just share accomplishments. Just as an encouragement, a 15-minute one-on-one. So we're really trying to put together a really fun retreat where we're doing some things. Just a reminder, dues need to be paid here shortly for 2021. I know some have paid. And Amy, you're good through 2021.
Yay!
Yeah. Anybody who is a new member that paid after October 1st is automatically paid through 2021. So, because we got a few new members in the last quarter of the year, and we just felt that it was better to put them through the whole year to really experience what lava
Crazy
is
we
and
are.
what to do. Yeah.
How crazy we are.
Yeah.
Well,
And
thank you for that.
Yeah, and I am known to do some weird stuff, so get ready, because I'm going to be hosting the retreat.
She's very,
All good. It's
yeah,
all good.
she's very calm right now, but I'll tell you what, this one's like Spitfire.
Yeah, so it will be fun. Let's see what else. I think that's it. So for announcements, at the end of our meeting, we're going to be doing the cover reveal for the Storyville project, the new anthology that we've put together this year on member short stories. And we're going to be publishing them by the 31st into a book that we will have for sale after it's been published. And then I'm hoping that the writers retreat in May is going to be a kickoff for the second book. So I thought it would be kind of cool to do this every year, have our members write short stories to include into this book and use it as a fundraiser for Lala. So I thank you all for being here. And our first presenter here is going to be Will, who is going to talk about fight scenes and writing fight scenes. So Will, take it over.
Take it over. Okay. Yeah, when we talked about this originally, Kim had talked to me about, writing the fight scenes and stuff such. And what I wanted to bring is some things about including a fight scene in your story. Okay. So what I've got is at the end, I'll talk about, verbiage a little bit, but I wanted to give some thoughts about if you're interested in including a fight scene in your story. So the first thing to think about, does your story need a fight scene? Think about the story you are currently writing or one that you're thinking about writing. You can think about one you just finished writing as well if you want to, and think about if you should have added a fight scene. But does the book you're currently writing or thinking about writing really need a fight scene? Okay. We'll talk about, how to include that in the book. If you don't think it needs a fight scene, feel free to take a nap right now, if you want to. So, but yeah. But what's really important, what I found in my research, I think the most important thing to me that came up is how is the fight scene going to move your storyline along? Okay, that's the most important thing, because it'll be able to enhance, your characters, your scenery, your storyline, and so forth. So, how is it going to move your storyline along? Don't just add a fight scene because you want one. Make sure it helps the story. So, determine how the fight scene fits into your story. Have you built up enough suspense and action in the previous pages of the story to prepare the reader for the fight scene is one thing. Are your protagonist and antagonist playing cat and mouse throughout the novel, leading to a showdown at the end of the fight scene? Or will the fight scene be in the beginning that creates what your storyline is going to be about? So where you put that fight scene is going to be important. If you have it at the beginning, how does that impact the rest of the story? Or is your story about the fight scene that's been building up until the end of the novel? The other option is, will the fight scene happen several times throughout the novel? Okay. So is your protagonist trying to save a key character by fighting an antagonist? And are there multiple characters involved in this fight scene, or just two characters? You could have, 4 or 5 people that are always at odds with each other. So think about what purpose the fight scene will serve in your story and how it will move the story along. Next, what kind of story are you writing? I'm going to go through several different types of genre here and just kind of create some ideas. So what kind of story are you writing that needs a fight scene? What's your story genre? And who are the protagonist and antagonist? Okay, so a horror story, let's start with that. Can you fit a fight scene between 2 or more characters in a horror story? Well, you can either have the 2 characters do it or multiple characters. Will it help refine your character's personality for the horror that is about to happen? Okay, can you write a book about okay, the next one is a castaway. Okay, write a book about a castaway on a deserted island and come up with a fight scene. If you think of Tom Hanks when he was on that island, he was talking to a soccer ball that was his best friend. How do you create a fight scene with something like that? You'd have to think about that a little bit. But if you think about Ernest Hemingway, he wrote a story about a man alone in a fishing boat, and his fight scene was with a large fish. So you've got somebody by themselves with just one single person, and there's a fight scene involved with that, but it's with a fish. Okay. Love stories. How do you write a fight scene with a love story? So you've got potential lovers that have a fight and then make up classic romance story. Okay. How about the potential lovers fighting all the time? They're always arguing. They meet. They think they love each other, and through a period of 4 or 5 or 6 months throughout the story, they're constantly, having a good time, but in between it, they're always fighting about different things until they find out that they're not compatible with each other. So then, do they break up? So you could have multiple fight scenes throughout the entire book with something like that. And then you got to ask, did the book just turn into a horror story? So, okay, science fiction and fantasy. With science fiction, how to write a fight scene between Jedi Knights. I mean, that's one thing you're talking about. Science fiction, you got Jedi Knights fighting, and we all know that's been done. And how about science fiction where a fight scene is between spacecrafts, like the Starship Enterprise and a Klingon vessel? So now your fight scene is between ships. So instead of talking about people having a fight in sci-fi, you're talking about equipment having a fight in sci-fi. The other thing is in sci-fi, you could have humans versus aliens. You could have humans versus machine, and you could have machine versus machine, as I mentioned with the spacecraft. So these are just some things with the genre. A couple more here. Children's book. A fight scene between two toddlers, both wanting to play with the same toy. A good way to teach younger children about manners and stuff like that is maybe you're writing a children's book and you would never thought about putting a fight scene in it. But if it's an educational book, maybe they have a fight scene and it's a good opportunity for them to learn about manners and to push that issue with them. Let's see. How do you write a fight scene that one of your characters creates in the story? Think about a young child playing with two toys, or playing with two toys, and the young child creates the fight scene. One might be a fighter jet that the child's playing with, and the other toy might be a munitions train. So it's a war theme in this one, where the child is flying the jet and blows up the munitions train. So you've got a child in your storyline, but the child is creating the fight scene. Another thing on that is maybe the child has a Barbie and a Ken doll, okay? And so if your story is about the child, but the child is creating the fight scene, think about how much insight that could give you to the child's thought processes and the personality. It's got a Barbie doll and a Ken doll, and what's going on with that? The Barbie and Ken doll are constantly fighting with each other, or they're walking through the park holding hands. So what does that tell you about the child and the way that the child is growing up? Are the parents, the child sees the parents walking through the park holding hands, having fun, or is the child seeing the parents always fighting with each other? So that can add a lot to your story, having one of your characters creating a fight scene. A couple more here. If writing a book about boxing, is the fight scene focused on the boxing match? Everybody would think that you got a book on boxing, so the fight scene is going to be about boxing and boxing alone. But what if one of the boxers and some poor guy off the street who drank too much, they're walking down the street and this drunk bumps into him, and now he wants to fight the boxer, and now you got another fight scene outside of the ring, outside the boxing ring. Same with martial arts. You've got, if you're writing a book about martial arts, you could have two guys in a contest that, you paid a ticket to go see it, and two guys are, in a karate fight, okay? But outside of that ring, you could have one of these karate fighters come in contact with somebody that knows a different type of martial arts, like Tai Chi or Taekwondo or something like that. And now you've got two different styles of fighting between two different people outside of the actual, fighting event that people were expecting to see. So you can add fight scenes in so many different ways. Then there's just the simple, you got two guys walking down the street, they look at each other wrong, and so they just start fighting with each other. So there's, depending on your genre, you can have all different types of fight scenes. If it should have a fight scene, if your book should have a fight scene, think about the protagonist and the antagonist. We've already touched on that some, but when we talked about the genre, a little bit different types of genre, the sci-fi and love stories and so on. The type of fight scene you create will have a direct impact on the characters or machines throughout the rest of the story. And it should reveal the true nature, okay, of your the people that are fighting. So you can use the fight scene to create the type of person you want to have in your story. You know, what type of person is he? How will the protagonist and antagonist move your story along? Think about it in a military, going back to the military theme. You have a submarine commander and you have a destroyer commander, okay? And is the submarine commander who's trying to sink the destroyer, is he actually smart enough? Does he have enough intelligence? Has he been trained well enough by the military to actually know the tactics to try to take out a destroyer or you know, battleship or any other type of ship? So if your submarine commander didn't graduate with top honors in his military training, then does that put the sub at risk because the destroyer commander who's going after him was a top graduate? You know, how are you going to play these characters against each other, and how will they impact your story? So if the sub commander is not the brightest guy in the world, he would be considered the underdog. But if he ends up sinking the destroyer, you know, he goes back, he gets all kind of accolades and stuff like that, but everybody knows he's not the smartest guy. You know, where does that lead your story along? Is what I'm getting at there. Does the destroyer commander even have enough intelligence or knowledge to use his ship properly to go after the submarine? I was thinking about the movie The Caine Mutiny with Humphrey Bogart. He plays the captain of a ship. This gives a lot of insight into his character. He was getting into an area where the ship was threatened, you know, to be taken out, and he appeared to be like he was mentally unstable. So at the end of the movie, there was a trial because somebody took over the ship and relieved him of command. And so during the trial, you know, they were trying to determine if he was mentally capable of even continuing in the military or having another command. So think about how would he be portrayed in the rest of the story if he was marked as a coward or mentally unstable, versus being mentally unstable due to PTSD. You know, so all these different aspects can come into your characters. Okay. I hope you don't hear my dogs barking in the background. So, fantasy or futuristic, possible protagonist, antagonist, as I mentioned, is alien versus alien, or alien versus human, hobbit versus human, giant versus an elf or fairy. Let's see here. How would, you know, if you, again, going back to the child, if a child had a bunch of toys from the movie theaters, you know, the parents go see a movie, they bring toys home, how would the child present the characters other than the Barbie and Ken doll? How would they present aliens fighting against aliens? So now you're stepping away from using Barbie and Ken, where the child might use that to show how their parents' lives are. Now you're getting into how would the child use aliens to fight aliens. Now you're getting into the child's personality more, because he doesn't necessarily see aliens on an everyday basis. So he's just going to look at aliens and come up with something creative out of his own mind. And then can you have a fight scene? I mentioned earlier about having a fight scene with just one person, but then it became, you know, a fight scene where the guy in the boat's fighting the fish, you know, so he's fighting something against nature. But what about a fight scene just with one person in a room, nobody else around, no nature, no nothing? And could you do that if the person was a schizophrenic? Okay. If you think about the movie A Beautiful Mind, I forget the actor's name, but the main character in there was schizophrenic. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, he was a college professor and he was teaching math, and he was talking to one of his students after class. They walked out into the hallway and he was talking to one of the students, and a person walked up to him and said, you know, Mr. So-and-so, we need to have a conversation. And immediately the college professor that was a schizophrenic turned to his student and asked, do you see this person here? And the college student was like, yeah, I see him. Is he talking and can you hear him? Yeah, I can hear him. He goes, okay, so I know he's real. And so he turned back to the person that approached him and said, okay, what do you want to talk about? But the schizophrenic, the college professor was schizophrenic, had to ask the student if the person he was listening to was real. He was that, schizophrenic. So if you put somebody like that into a room with nothing in there, would all of a sudden he have a fight with different personalities that he sees coming to him? So something else to think about. What kind of antagonist and protagonist can you think of with a schizophrenic person? Your storyline should also help determine what type of fight scene you should have. Again, mentioning, the genres, if you have, sci-fi and stuff like that. So, but not all fight scenes, need to be fast paced. One of the things that I read when I was doing the research, there was so much information on creating a fight scene that said it has to be fast paced. It has to be very detailed so people don't miss out on what's actually going on. People understand how the fight scene is being done, but not all fight scenes have to be fast paced. If you are writing let's say that you're writing a love story, you've got a newly married couple with very little money, fighting about how much money to spend on groceries or whether or not both should work. Who's going to pay for daycare? One would want somebody to stay home with the child, the other person works, things like that. You're not going to have a physical fight. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fast-paced fight scene. Some of the things I read about that. There's no physical action. It's mostly emotion. So how do you express the stress and frustration? One of the things as researching this, if you're looking at a physical fight, you need to have a lot of action verbs and things like that. But in this type of situation where a married couple is fighting, you want to have words that are more emotional. So using the wrong words for a certain type of fight scene, I just wrote a real quick example here. And this would be using action words that you would see in a physical fight, but you're using those words in kind of an emotional type setting. So a quick little thing here to read this. Sally quickly stomped into the living room and forcefully plopped herself down on the couch next to an already frustrated Tommy. With a striking blow of verbal abuse and being quick as lightning, she struck Tommy with a screaming question. Who in hell is going to pay for daycare if you decide to go back to work? She followed up her verbal strike with a powerful jab to his emotions and a devastating blow to his ego by adding, you simply won't make enough money to pay for daycare, let alone any other expenses that come up with you joining the workforce. John struck back with what Sally thought of as an irrational and emotional response that landed like a punch to the gut. But I need to work to get me out of the house so I don't go crazy. He continued with a flurry of rapid questions. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? What's going to happen? How's that going? So that's a story. You're talking about emotions, between two people having an argument, a fight, that are married, So if this is part of a love scene book, your genre is a love story, you're using the wrong words. Okay. So using the right words, as frustrating as it was for Sally, this is the example of using words that would express more emotion. As frustrating as it was for Sally, she entered the living room and sat down on the couch next to John. It was difficult to remain calm, as they had already been through this discussion a few weeks ago. Listen, Sally said, I don't have any problems with you going back to work, but it is going to cost us more money than what you are going to make. And we are already struggling. Daycare alone will eat up 75 of your take-home pay. Then we will need to consider other expenses such as a vehicle for you to get to work, the extra gas money, the car insurance, the maintenance, a new wardrobe for you to wear. We simply can't afford for you to go back to work yet. John looked at Sally with anger in his eyes. I don't care. I need to work. We will just have to tighten our belts and stop spending money on needless things. Sally just shook her head, anger welling up. What needless things? Our budget is down to the bone right now. John said, we'll just have to figure it out. And with a stern and red-faced got up and left. So making sure you select the right words for the fight that you're creating is very important. You know, you saw the action words for an emotional scene. Making sure you use those correctly is important to get your point across to help the story flow better as well. Another issue with a fight scene is not using enough descriptors during the fight. And here's an example of that. The driver of a small car stepped out and approached Jimmy's motorcycle. What in the world are you thinking? You cut me off back there and at the intersection, and I almost hit you. Jimmy turned to the driver and said, sorry about that, I'm in a hurry. The driver of the small car lunged at Jimmy and knocked him off his motorcycle onto the ground, where he began kicking him. When he was finished, he got back in the car and left. So that's a real thin story, for a physical altercation, and it didn't use a lot of descriptors and describing the scene. Here's one with a little bit more descriptors describing the scene. The driver of a small car, red-faced and angry, stepped out and quickly approached Jimmy's motorcycle. What in hell were you thinking? You cut me off back there at the intersection and I almost hit you. You've got to be the stupidest motorcyclist I've ever seen. Stupid? Who are you calling stupid? Jimmy stepped off his motorcycle and went nose to nose with his belligerent driver. Without any warning at all, the driver of the car walloped Jimmy, making him stumble backwards and trip over his motorcycle. Before Jimmy could pick himself up, the other driver was hovering over him with a menacing look on his face and an I dare you to get up attitude. Before the driver of the car could do anything, Jimmy rolled quickly out of the way and stood up on his feet in a flash. The driver of the car wasn't ready for it and took a quick step backwards. Jimmy lunged forward with the force of an NFL linebacker and knocked the air out of the other driver. He forced him to the ground and began pummeling him with fists. As other drivers saw the devastation Jimmy was bringing to the driver on the ground, they stopped and started recording the horrible scene with their camera phones. So using enough verbiage, you don't want your fight scene to be too thin. People will be wondering what's it all about. It's just not exciting. It doesn't display any emotions. It might not push your story along, but Jimmy, with this story, Jimmy hitting the guy with with the force of an NFL linebacker, pushing him to the ground. Later on, you could talk about he has anger issues. Maybe he was going to anger management classes. So how will something like that move it along? But also you're using more descriptors to explain the fight and how devastating it was. Finally,
question.
Yes.
So Will, if people want to find out more, can they contact you directly for advice or?
Yeah, yep, if they'd like to. I can get my email out there, or you can send my email out if you want.
Okay.
So to finish this up, I just got one more section here. One of the first writing exercises that I ever went through was with LAWA. It was actually Brainerd Writers Alliance at the time before we changed our name, and it was something that Bev, I see you there, Bev, something that Bev did. She had us in the LAWA meeting. She wanted to talk about creating a scene, and she had everybody there close their eyes and imagine being in a room. Then she talked about our senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And she talked us through these senses. What do you hear? What do you smell, etc. And then she planted suggestions. Do you smell smoke from a wood fire? Do you smell gasoline or diesel fuel? Do you hear birds chirping or traffic from a nearby road? And on she went about different things, and it was creating something in our minds. And this is something that can be very beneficial when you're trying to create a fight scene. And so as you're getting ready to write a fight scene, or you're thinking about a fight scene, you can simply close your eyes and think about this. should you have a fight scene? That's the first thing you should think about. And should it be one or more fight scenes? So answer that question for yourself right at the beginning. Should you have one, yes or no? If not, don't worry about it. If yes, should there be one or more fight scenes? Okay, as you have your eyes closed and you're thinking about your novel and you're going through what you want your book to be about, what kind of a fight scene should it be? Should it be a technical fight scene, people fighting about electronics, how to use them in a piece of equipment, military equipment? Should it be a military fight scene? Should it be a fight against nature like the old man in the sea? One guy in a boat fighting against a fish? Should it be fast-paced, slow-paced? Should it involve weapons, guns, broken bottles, that type of thing? So what kind of a fight scene should it be that will help move your storyline along? Think about the storyline of your book. As far as what what the fight is about. Is it vengeance, a simple misunderstanding, or a major battle between good and evil? And then let's see, the last two, who are the protagonist and antagonist? A fight scene is a good way to describe the physical characteristics of the protagonist and antagonist, their thought process, their lifestyle. So you can get a lot of descriptors in there about your protagonist and antagonist. You can also get a lot of descriptors in there about the scenery. Was the fight, did it take place in the city? Did it take place in an arena where people were watching? Where is the fight happening, and how can you use the scenery around that fight to enhance your book? So the fight scene, will it enhance your storyline? Will it enhance your character? Will it enhance your scenery or setting in your book? And will it be good for your book as a whole? So those are just some ideas. Your genre, how it's going to work with your genre, how it develops your characters, and more importantly, how it develops your story.
Well, thank you, Will.
So that's it. Yep, that's it. So
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will, for your presentation, and we're going to move on to Carissa, who
There's
is.
no like Q&A at all?
How about if we do Q&A at the end? I want to make sure that you have enough time to present your information this morning. So
Okay.
Carissa's going to start with writing good dialogue.
Okay, first let me share a part of my screen here. Can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Yes, okay, fantastic. Let me make sure that I have the whole thing set up here. Okay, so we're going to talk about good dialogue, and obviously good dialogue really can make or break a novel. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And a lot like what Will was talking about with the fight scenes, good dialogue has some very important roles when it comes to what it does in your novels or short stories or anything else that we're writing, come to think of it. Okay. So what should good dialogue do? Well, obviously it should move your story forward, just like those fight scenes. You don't want to create a fight scene and have it mean nothing. Well, the same goes with dialogue. So after each conversation or exchange, the reader really should be one step closer to either the climax or the conclusion of your story. Next up, it should always be relevant, and it should be relevant about the character, the setting, the storyline, whatever the case might be, because the right dialogue will give the reader the insights, I guess, on how the character feels, what's motivating him or her to act. And it, like I said, it ultimately will be important, or it should be important to the goal and the conclusion of your story. Otherwise, there's really no purpose for it. And it must also help the reader understand the relationship between characters, because if you're going to be having any kind of conversation, obviously the goal there then is how does this particular person talk differently? How do they interact with this other person? Why are they saying something the way that they're saying it? Whatever the case might be, it should be helping the reader really to understand the relationships between the two people or three people or whatever, however many people are talking. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few tips in order to keep, I think there's 15 of them, in order to give yourself good dialogue. So obviously this first one is keep it brief. So good dialogue, it shouldn't really go over pages and pages and pages. So if that's happening, you should probably be writing a play instead of a novel. The best dialogue inside of a novel or a short story is always brief. And it's because we're not actually trying to recreate or reenact their entire life from second to second. It's like a slice of a pizza. It's not a whole pizza. You get what I'm saying? So you don't need to go into lengthy exchanges to reveal important truths about characters or their motivations and how they view the world. Plus, the dialogue that goes on for far too long can actually feel more like a tennis match, I guess, between the two characters. So the reader starts to go, okay, there's way too much happening here and it's just bouncing back and forth. And a lot of times it's not important information, so it needs to be cut. So lengthy dialogue can always be really exhausting to the reader, to the writer. So when in doubt, your best option is always to just pare it back to the essential information you want put in that particular exchange. That being said, you want to avoid the small talk. So a dialogue in your stories should exist to, like we said, for the momentum of your story and the goals of the story. And it shouldn't exist just to give your character something to say or to bump up your word counts or anything like that. So really it serves as this powerful motivator for the story. You can explore your characters, you advance your plot, you ramp up the tension, you can reveal context, establish mood, so on. There's a lot of good reasons to be able to use good dialogue. And a good rule of thumb is that if you can remove a line of dialogue from your manuscript, or worse yet, like an entire paragraph or an entire conversation, and it doesn't impact the understanding of your story, there's probably a good chance that that bit of dialogue lacks strong purpose and direction, and it's time to cut those darlings. We've all heard that one before, right? Cut the darlings. Even if it's a great conversation, and even if it's fun to read or listen to, if it doesn't actually progress your storyline, it's something that should probably be cut. All right, so next up, no info dumping in your dialogue. While you can certainly use dialogue to learn more about your characters, you shouldn't use it to dump a whole lot of information on the reader. I don't know about you, but it's really cringeworthy to read a dialogue exchange that starts with something like, well, as you know, well, if the character already knows something, then why is it that the other character is repeating it? And it's same even with our own dialogue, right? If we're like irritated at someone, we're like, as you already know, or start off an email that's really, irritated, as you already know, or as I said. It's also cringeworthy though when characters, especially villains, I don't know, you probably all know this one, where they go into that lengthy diatribe about why they're doing X, Y, or Z, or how their big plot is gonna like take over the world. People don't talk like that. No one interacts like that. And unless you're trying to overcharacterize something, which then it works, you want to make sure that you're creating smart dialogue that really does make sense and doesn't go into something that people really in real world would not do. Like a villain would not tell you what their ultimate plan is. That's just not a very smart tactic. If there are things that you do need to get in there with a lot of information, don't do it in dialogue, because info dumps in any way, shape, or form, they do slow the dialogue down to like a grinding halt. So it starts to sound awkward, and it actually insults the reader's intelligence. So you don't want to be doing that inside of a dialogue exchange. You want to be using it more in your exposition instead. So what's the difference between info dumping and revealing relevant info? Info dumping is really that large amount of exposition given all at once and left for the reader to then sort out like what part's relevant. But the relevant information is really more subtle, and it's dispensed a little bit at a time and in context to whatever is happening in the scene. So if it doesn't make sense in the scene and it doesn't make sense for the person to be saying it right at that particular moment, it's probably something that's not relevant and it doesn't need to be put inside the dialogue exchange. Okay, so tip number 4 is to use body language and expressions in place of dialogue tags. And we're going to talk a little more about dialogue tags in a little bit, but people, when you're doing a lot of dialogue and you're doing a conversation between people, being able to show the reader what's happening between those characters can really be a vital part of how the reader perceives what's happening. So using body language and expressions is really key, because people say just as much with their expressions and their body language as they do with their mouths. So posture, eye contact, mannerisms, reactions, all that stuff should be playing a prominent role in the conversations that your characters are holding. So in fact, you should even sprinkle these in like I said, through the dialogue tags, and you should be using it as a way to be able to just kind of break up whatever it is it's saying. So an example of using body language and expression could be something like, Ren's sigh is thick. It's called Facebook, dear, not my face. So something like that, where you're using Ren's sigh is thick as the opening to the thing. That's a more of the expression and body language where he's sighing. Or it could be, I suppose the trip would take about a day, Aiden shrugs. But it's not, you're not using it as a dialogue tag. It's not Aiden says, he's shrugging. Go, eh. So you already know that he assumes something, but he's not entirely certain about it. Or Diana rolls her eyes. It's the first time, or I heard you the first time. So you're using something where you obviously know she's irritated. She's like, of course, whatever. So using that body language or the expressions of the way that they are interpreting the information coming at them is really critical in being able to, I don't know, just give your characters that component of realism, and then keeping your readers in a moment where they're not just feeling like they're sucked into that tennis match between characters as they're having good dialogue going back and forth. So characters gotta have a unique way of speaking, don't you know? Basically, give your characters a unique way of talking, because every character, just like every person you know, they're gonna have a unique way of speaking and delivering their thoughts. And some people are more forceful and deliberate, others are more passive and meandering. You can honor all of these and other different styles without rambling through your dialogue. And a preferred method is really to focus on your word choice and the way that your characters are going to use specific words. So for example, to show that someone is rather gruff or abrupt, you go towards a like single syllable or somewhat quick like phrase like, yeah. But if I were looking to choose words for a charming character, I would be a little bit more graceful, of course, you know. So the same basic concept, but its delivery is a little bit different based on what type of character they are and kind of how they're interacting with each other. Now, of course, word choice alone can't dictate the character. You'll do most of that through your characterization, some of that stuff that we were talking about before with the expressions and the body language. But word choice can very subtly support and reinforce the way your character has already been built, the way the person reading your story has already kind of built out the character in their own minds. So along with word choice, I also like to establish a pattern of speech. So does the character speak in those sharp staccatos or deliberate flowing manner? Do they have an accent, or do they misuse words all the time? So deliberately sitting and thinking through this sort of stuff really gives your character's speech a little more oomph, and the readers do take notice of it. And they're able to point out, like, even if you don't put dialogue tags in, you'll be able to tell what character is saying what, just based off of the way that they're talking and the way they're using language. Okay, so slang, curses, and messy speech. So realistic conversations, they really take place you know, in a way that's like not a bubble. You know, you're not going to always have people who are polite, and they're not always going to have perfect conversations. People are messy, and our dialogue really is too. So you don't want to be afraid to allow your characters to speak in fragments or unfinished sentences, to really like screw up their grammar or use slang, or hell, even curse up a storm should the situation warrant it. So you want to make sure that you're including conversations that are realistic and probably not the way that you would have a conversation as the author, because each person is different and you want your characters each to be different and be consistent with who they are. Which leads us to be consistent. Now remember, being consistent with your characters really means someone who is speaking, like if you have someone who's speaking in a self-deprecating or shy manner, they're not going to all of a sudden become automatically bold or really like forceful. So if they have an accent, you should maintain that accent throughout the story. You want to do all that. Unless they have an evolution where their speech changes or something does happen, you want to make sure that that process is deliberate and that the reader knows that all that stuff is supposed to be changing. Otherwise, that consistency gets lost and the readers are like, who is this? And this doesn't even make sense, because I swear this character wouldn't behave this way. So when your characters do speak, when you stay true to who they are, like I said before, even though the character, the dialogue for the characters doesn't have a dialogue tag to it, the reader should be able to figure out pretty quickly who's actually doing the talking in the whole thing. Okay, so number 8, remember that people rarely say what they mean. People are always complex, and they just, for whatever reason, say one thing, do another, I don't know, whatever. Rarely do we say what we really want to say in the way that we want to say it. So instead, we tailor ourselves to our surroundings, striving to fit in or sometimes stand out, to cut deep on someone, to flatter, to appease, whatever the case might be for the particular scene or the situation. So it's no wonder that dialogue that seems too perfect really starts to ring false with readers. So you want to craft nuanced conversations that take voice and circumstances into account, but it can be tricky. And it takes a little bit of time to make sure that, should they actually say exactly what you think they should be saying right here? Or should they tell a little white lie? Should they try to get themselves out of trouble right here? Should they be way nicer to this particular person or whatever, just because it's a different kind of person? Which actually leads us to honor the relationship. Because characters tend to speak, people, but characters tend to speak differently based on who it is they're speaking to. A character, speaking to their boss, for instance, is going to speak differently to his grandmother or to his spouse. That's not a shift in consistency. So it's not taking that out of the equation. It actually gives a little bit more depth and realism to the character. You can stay true to your character's personality by creating and using that same speech pattern or accent or whatever. But with this, it's really more about their personality, what's underneath, like how would they speak to their boss versus speak to their grandma versus speak to their spouse or, their enemy? How are they different in all of those categories? Because that's really how people are in real life. Okay, so now we're going to get into the dialogue tag side of things.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that all of you know what dialogue tags are. It's that whole concept of he said, she said, things like that. Dialogue tags are really there to clarify who is saying what. And the most common dialogue tags, like we just said, are said, asked, replied. And other common tags are things like shouted, whispered, hissed. They expand on how a line of dialogue is actually being delivered. So dialogue tags are an important aspect of fictional conversations, but too many tags throughout your story can actually slow the pace of it. So, and sometimes depending on how you deliver that information, too many can actually draw the reader right out of the story entirely. So you don't want to do that. You want to definitely take a little bit of caution and care with how you're using dialogue tags and sprinkle them in with different things like action tags and the expressions or body language so that the reader, feel a little bit more ingrained into the storyline rather than being pulled out of it by all the different dialogue tags. So use them with caution, and don't forget to sprinkle in, like I said, all that other stuff to kind of break up everything and give the reader a little bit of a breather. However, when in doubt, don't try to make every single dialogue tag different. When in doubt, you want to use said or say, she says, whatever, however your story is being written and what tense you're writing it in. The clarity that tags really provide is vital, but bear in mind that the dialogue tags are really something that can pull readers straight out of a story because technically they're a narrative element not written from the point of view of the character's voice. Mm-hmm. So like the occasional sign of authorship won't pull a reader from the story, especially if they're deeply engaged. But the more ubiquitous you make your dialogue tags, the better, meaning that readers are going to graze over words like said and asked while still registering the identity of the speaker of the story, which ensures that the story keeps flowing without the suspension of disbelief inside the story, which is obviously what you want. You want your readers to just kind of glaze over he said, she said, Jim said, whatever, so that way they can just continue on with the story without feeling like they're being pulled out of it. Okay, so in other ways to use dialogue tags, you can use action instead. So action tags are the small attributive actions that precede or follow dialogue. And an example would be something like, Amanda fiddled with the hem of her skirt. I don't know if that's the best idea. Or, are you sure that's really what you want? Brad raised an eyebrow. Or make use of action tags as a way to keep readers engaged and adding a little bit of motion to a scene, because it gets, when your scenes get a little too static, even if they're not, they're not in a fight scene, nothing exciting really is happening, but they very rarely just sit completely still. And when they do, they start to get bored. So you want to use small actions just to give a little bit of movement. That's why you see it all the time in films where, very rarely a scene is cut where everybody is sitting completely still. Even in the way that they shoot a scene, you're going to see the scene from about 15 different angles because it breaks up the monotony of looking at something in one specific way all the time. Okay, so you can also use strong tonal tags. So something like she whispered is a strong tonal tag. Instead of saying something like she asked quietly, or you could say like hissed instead of he said in a nasty voice. While you're kind of bumping up the number of words you're putting into your story, it doesn't have the same clarity and it doesn't have the same oomph that using the strong tonal tag actually has. So use it with care though, like I said, because too many of those sprinkled throughout can actually pull the reader out of the story, but they can be very important when that tone is important to the part of the story and how you're kind of handling everything. Okay, so you also want to use realistic tags. Many writers mistakenly attribute action tags in place of attributive tags, and it's actually a grammatical error. And it's actually probably a key thing that drives copy editors up a wall. So here's a couple of examples. So improper usage of action tags would be, I can't believe it, comma, Emma gasped, or that's hilarious, comma, Henry chuckled. Unless you're superhuman, you probably can't gasp or chuckle words. Yet this is exactly what the above sentences actually imply.
Oh.
So instead, let's take a look at the way the ones below it, how they're actually properly attributing these dialogue tags. So I can't believe it, comma, Emma said with a gasp, or it would be Emma gasped, period, I can't believe it. Same thing with that's hilarious, exclamation point, Henry chuckled, or that's hilarious, comma, Henry said, chuckling. So do you see the difference between the two? The dialogue might not need to be entirely realistic, but the tags themselves certainly should be. So that's something that you want to be definitely taking a look at and making sure that you're using the realistic tags that go along with whatever it is you're trying to say. And then finally, narrative tags or using dialogue tags to break up the narrative is really important too, because when you're having narrative that goes on for a long time or exposition that goes on a long time, it can become tedious, especially when there's a lot of words on a single page. And when it goes on and spans page after page, it actually becomes really taxing to the reader, no matter how exciting hypothetically it can be. So adding a line or two of dialogue is a really great way to give readers' eyes a break. And it also helps to kind of give you an entry point into a way to be able to deliver new information, progress your story, but do it in a way that's sometimes more fun because you can use language that people are saying back and forth in a way that really kind of puts a fun spin on things or puts a nuance, adds tension, creates something that is going to really make the readers want to continue reading versus just reading a bunch of exposition going on and on and on. So at this point, guess what? It's time to go get writing. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but that's the presentation on good dialogue. Hopefully that was helpful.
And do we have any questions? What you do is whoops, wrong mouse. You put them into the chat area on the bottom.
On the bottom. They can't just talk?
Oh, sure.
Like,
I don't see any chat area.
Oh,
there's a chat one. You just move your screen or move your mouse around.
Do I have to click? Oh, there it says chat.
Pull up from the bottom.
I have a thing for Will. And you can all answer it, but I just finished pretty much editing book 1, and it basically does end in a fight scene that is kind of, then there's a little bit more falling action, but the fight scene basically is the bad girl kicking Amanda from the behind. She kicks her knee so that her knee comes, falls, and she hits the floor with her knee, which is her bad knee. And she's not fighting back. There's no fighting back. The perpetrator is grabbed by her friends and taken off through the crowd. And I'm thinking, maybe that's really weak that I don't have Amanda do anything. The principal comes and gets her, and she's suspended, and that's the end of that book. And now that's not the end of that character. The next book, obviously that whole tension is going to be picked up with a big explosion at the beginning of the book. But anyway, do you think that that's okay? That's what Amanda's been trying to do all of her first book, is kind of like control her emotions and get the job done and be a good leader and not let herself be angry and snotty when some of the kids are snotty toward her. And so by the end of that book, and we're at the big carnival scene and her work is paid off and then she gets hurt. I'm thinking, do you think that's not a good, it's a very quick fight scene, but.
How many
it's
books are there, Bev? Are there 3?
Well, right now there's 3. Who knows what'll happen?
But she,
If they
but she's
take off.
right. So she's
Yeah.
planning to make progress though. So you want her to grow so that she gets to the point where she's stronger by the end of the 3rd book, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she's already shown a lot of maturing in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know about
Yeah.
what Will thinks, but I think that in a first book, it's probably just fine to let her not fight back, because you want to show that growth and how she's going to handle things, unless the growth is that she's trying to be more diplomatic. And by book 3, she's diplomatic, where in this book, then she's operating just on instinct, I guess. Because if that's the case, instinct would probably say that she would fight back, and she has to grow into more maturity where she doesn't. So it just depends on what direction you're trying to take the character in her ultimate
Yeah.
growth cycle.
well, there's going to be a lot more growth coming up, but yeah, that first book we're kind of already done. You know, all the other stuff has happened, and it's a last punch. And then people are helping Amanda and her friend. You know, part of the thing is that the others from that new school haven't accepted her until that night, and they start helping her, and they, you know, all that. So yeah.
Since that book is already finished, if you
Oh, it's
wanted
not
to.
finished. It's not published.
Oh,
There's
okay.
always room for change.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was already published, but if you wanted her to slide back a little bit and revert back to not being as mature, you could start that in your second book as taking vengeance against her. She runs
Right.
into her someplace and then, you know, clocks her and knocks her down or something like that. And then she continues her growth to into maturity about being more mature about those types of things. So again, I think what Chris has said, it depends on how you want your character to be developed in the next book until you know, the final end. So
Okay.
you could play that either way. You could play it that she goes back in the beginning of the next book, she goes back and reverts back to being kind of a vengeful person, or she just continues to mature from that point forward.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, the way I've got it written, she can't fight back because they drag her away, and then the principal drags her away, and she's
She
suspended.
could still
for
be
the-
like, she could still be fighting those people dragging her away though, like where she's trying to get back to it so that she can, even if
so-
she physically can't do it, she could still be kind of, you know,
yeah,
flopping
Amanda's
around trying to
be-
get back to her.
Amanda's not being dragged away. She's on the
Oh,
floor.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
But and then her friends are helping her, but the person that did it has been dragged away, and then the principal catches her and takes her out. They see, but I mean, the whole story continues on with Amanda and her friends, and then the ending of the story, and then the next big scene is just the awards ceremony and the cleanup. And Amanda's thinking about, you know, how nice it is that these kids are getting rewarded, even though they've done some bad stuff. They're feeling more accepted. They got the award for making the most money for their game that they produce for the carnival.
Is it Amanda that is the one that was
She's the main
attacked?
character.
She's the one that was attacked from behind, and the other
Yeah.
character was dragged away, right? So Amanda
Yeah.
is the one that was trying to keep her cool. You could even near the end of the next book, you know, the beginning of the next book could be she maintains her posture of, you know, I'm going to try to be friendly and mature and stuff like that, and then have her slip up somewhere near the end of that book, so it reveals she still has these deep-seated feelings about it too. So
Yeah.
there's a couple ways you could play it, I guess.
Yeah, my second book is really going to have to be torn apart and changed a lot, I think. because like the actual girl who hurt her doesn't show up even until the third book.
Hmm.
And that probably can't happen. There's got to be some kind of interaction, you know, because something else happens in that second book right away. I think it's the first or second scene where somebody has really hurt Amanda's best friend. So this would be the fight between, you know, trying to defend one of your weaker, small. This girl is really shy and small and whatever. She turns out to be a super good friend though. But yeah, it's kind of like, we don't know who did the bad thing to this girl. We assume that it's the two snooty girls that are the new girls. But in fact, it's actually these two younger boys that are kind of have crushes on the two, on the Priscilla and Anne, bad girls. So I don't know if any of that's going to stay. You know, it might be completely different. Anyway, I'm done. You guys ask your questions.
Any other questions? No.
My goodness.
Okay, well, let's move on to the great reveal of the Storyville project cover.
Oh man, that means I gotta open it. Hang on a second, guys. My program's like, oh, that's right. I should probably have turned on. Should have turned that on. I have the other one up. Okay, let's put the slides down. There we go. Oops. All right, big reveal. Dun, dun, dun. Share some screen. There we go.
Yay!
Here it is, guys.
That's the one I liked.
I like that.
Ah,
It's so nice and cozy.
yes.
Of course,
So there is our story for our Storyville cover this year.
are the stories that are in it cozy?
No,
Probably not.
No.
So this is not reflecting the whatever.
There's
No.
a whole, I mean, some of them are, but there's a lot of different stories in here. I mean, they span all different genres.
I don't
Right.
even know what I call mine. I guess it's an allegory.
That's kind of fun,
Yeah,
you know, all the different genres.
absolutely. Yeah. So it's more, I think that's more reflective of what the reader should be doing or feeling when they're sitting
Right.
down to read all of them. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you can sit down by the fire and enjoy a good horror story, right?
Heck yeah. Although in saying that, Joe's was not a horror story. It was more of a science fiction-y mind bender in a way. So I was
Oh.
surprised he didn't do horror. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't.
so that is it. The book will be published. The goal is by the end of the month. And
What does it
then,
cost for us?
we don't have that determination yet until we
Oh, okay.
get it up on Amazon to see what the printing cost is. The
We're
writers.
going to do an ebook version too, though, right? If people
We're
want to
gonna
get
do an
version.
ebook and a hard copy, although the ebook will not be in Kindle and Unlimited. This is a fundraising event.
So we
So
want to be able to sell it other places, or
yes, there's going to be local bookstores that are going to be selling it as well.
that has nothing to do with Kindle Unlimited. It's Kindle Unlimited. It's only ebook version. You can sell a paperback version anywhere you want.
Correct, but the ebook version will not be under Kindle Unlimited. The KDP.
Why?
Because I don't think we should give this book away for free. It's a
That's not for
fundraiser.
free.
On
Yeah.
Kindle
not free.
Unlimited it is.
No, it's not.
I
You get
paid,
paid for page reads, woman.
huh?
You get
Oh,
paid
yeah,
for
but the
page
page
reads.
reads aren't gonna pay enough. This is a fundraiser and we need to treat it as such. So you'll have to, if you
Okay,
buy it on
so
Kindle.
then we'll have to make sure that it's out on available wide then, so that people can buy it on any platform rather than just Kindle.
So.
Yep.
And that,
That costs more in the setup to make it wide.
No,
no,
it's a different platform we have to use. Rather than using KDP's dashboard, we'll use a like Drafted Digital or something to be able to put it out.
You guys are so smart.
I have a
We've
question.
just been around the block a while.
Yeah.
I have
What
a
was that, Will?
question about this. I don't know if you would know Carissa or if you would know Kim or Chris or anybody else. I know it's hard to get books into bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and so on, but would they do a quick setup knowing it's a fundraiser for a local, state organization? Like if we went to Minneapolis or St. Cloud and asked them just to put a display up, for a 6-month period with our books there because we're doing a fundraiser. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, it's always possible. You can always reach out to any bookstore to ask them if they'd be willing to either do it in consignment or if they'd be willing to order it through Ingram.
'Cause I know that some of these bookstores have business practices that they have to order so many books, or they have to order from these people, or they want this genre or that genre. So I didn't know if it was possible that somebody could just walk in and say, hey, we're trying to do a fundraiser for Minnesota authors and a writing group.
Yeah, you can call even. You wouldn't have to walk in necessarily. You could call them and just say, hey, look, we're doing this thing. Would you be interested? What do I have to do in order to put it in? Yeah.
I found I was going to do a Barnes and Noble signing in Texas when I was down for a conference. And so the person that I spoke to there said that they wanted to order X number of books. And I had to, was it sign a paper, or maybe I did it through Ingram's when I published, but that you would pay for any returns of books. So I said that I would, and then to throw them away rather than, because otherwise you would have to pay for the mailing of them to you. So that's, but I never ended up doing it because that flood went through down there at that time. The Barnes and Noble was blown away. So I never did do it, but I have asked about signing at a Barnes and Noble in St. Cloud and or Fargo, and they would do it, but I don't know the specifics there, if you can just come in with your books or not, but I would guess that they would want to order them.
I think most of the time that's the way bookstores work, is they'd prefer ordering it through Ingram, because if, like they said, if there's a return or some sort of issue that comes up, then they know what the protocol is to be able to do the paperback return if they don't think they're going to be able to sell it or whatever. But
I was able to do I did my book signing for The Broken Circle at that, I think it's Apple Books in Alexandria. I think that's the name of it. And she ordered, I don't know how many books it was. And there was, I spoke to some people, during my signing, and it was a book club and they ordered the books and so on and so forth. And I ended up with like maybe 2 books on the shelf. And then I was able to get back to Alec sometime later. And I went in there just to look to see if there was any on the shelf left. And there wasn't. And so then I asked her about it. And then I think she went ahead and ordered like 2 books or whatever. And now, of course, I don't know with this pandemic if they're even in business. But anyways, it's a good way of getting your books on these other bookshelves. But you have to be able to find the book stores. Now, Once Upon a Crime in Minneapolis, if this was all mystery, they may be willing to put it on their shelf and have book signings with some of the authors. But since it's not all mystery, I bet they wouldn't. Because they won't do a book signing on The Broken Circle because it's not all mystery. They're pretty fussy.
Gotcha.
Maybe you could convince them that it's a mystery because nobody knows what types of genres are inside yet.
You're such a...
Well, they don't, this book has somewhat of a mystery in it, but it isn't a mystery, I guess. I don't know. finding a missing person. And I would think that would be mystery enough for them, but evidently not. So maybe your idea would be better.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never tried to approach a bookstore to put a book in it or anything, so I'm not sure exactly how it works, but if that's a possibility, I think it might be worth looking at. The other thing too, Kim, I can't remember, I can't remember if it was you or Bob that was looking for printers and such, people, printing companies to print some things. But we talked about doing this once a year. This is going to be an annual event where we're going to ask the members to write a short story, and we'll have a book come out once a year. If we do that, Kim, I'm wondering if it'd be worth creating a little display you can put on a counter where you can put 4 books in it in the front. And then as every year goes by, we could put, the next year we could put 2 books in there, one from this year, one from last year. And then 2022, we could have 3 different books in there. So we could have a variety of books, 2000, or 2020, 2021, 2022, and just have a small display that we can put on a counter. So as people are getting ready to check out, they could see it and say, well, this looks interesting, and then grab it.
Well, that would take some great organizing to do. These are great conversations, and we can continue them. The first thing is let's get the book published. And
Yep. Agreed.
Yes.
This is our first
The
one.
pragmatist.
Yep. So
And Kim, I know your time, Kim, is just,
my time is
you've been
very
spending
limited.
hours and hours on this stuff, so
And
yeah, I understand.
yes, and so I want to thank everyone for coming today. With being on Zoom, we like to keep the meetings to 1 hour, and we've kind of gone over that. So thank you for coming, and we will see you all next month. So have
Thank you guys.
a wonderful month.
Bye.